everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Esther Akanj, and I'm an academic trainer with the Center for Teaching and Learning. Today's session is titled Telehealth, Working with Clients Experiencing Suicidal Ideation and Self-Harm with our very own faculty member, Dr. Yemi Lakuti. We are thrilled to have you and thank you for being here with us today. Just a reminder to everyone, I am recording the webinar and the video will be posted on the CTL LibGuides and CTL YouTube page within 24 hours. If you have questions throughout today's session, you can use the Q&A or chat features located at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will have the Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. We welcome all questions and comments, so please don't be shy. With that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lakuti.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I am just going to go ahead and share my screen so we can start. All right, so welcome. My name is Dr. Yemi Lakuti. I am a part-time assistant professor at North Central University in the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. So today, the topic at hand is just basically how clinicians using their ethical and legal considerations when working with clients experiencing suicidal ideation and self-harm. Obviously, in the beginning of the pandemic, it created a new pathway for therapists to be able to, or more so for our clients to be able to access our services a little bit more. And then that was great. However, this also created a new a new way for us as clinicians to make sure we were still practicing ethically, and also taking a lot of other things into consideration when working with our clients via telehealth. Maybe I need to use my mouse instead. Yes, I do. So the topics of discussion today is we'll be talking about just what's entailed in, the client's paperwork, then confidentiality, suicide and self-harm assessments that are out there. Again, we are looking at evidence-based practices that are widely used in the field, and then what your plan of actions will look like when you're with your children, adolescents, as well as individual couples and families. And then obviously extra resources that are out there that I've actually used and implemented and when I'm working with my clients. And then we'll have Q&A towards the very end. Okay, so just a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Yemi. I go by Dr. Yemi. I live in Texas. And so I am a certified telehealth mental health provider, certified grief counseling professional, as well as a licensed professional counselor. I do have my PhD in marriage and family therapy. So some of the code of ethics that you will see, they are from the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. So since the pandemic, yes, I see children, adolescents. I've worked with parents and, parenting, couples, adolescents, individual young adults. And starting in June, I will be running my first group counseling for adolescents. So I am basically running through the proposals for that and just kind of making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, just to make sure everything goes accordingly. So the AAMFT strives to honor the public trust in marriage and family therapists. And so the reason why this is essential is because we want to make sure that we are honoring, obviously, the public. And by honoring the public, we're ensuring that we are that we are doing what we can ethically and making sure we have our clients' safety and best interest at heart when we are working with them. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is the client's paperwork. So informed therapists foster informed clients. This is where you are basically, and hopefully all of these sound remedial, because when you're practicing, I don't know, where you guys are in terms of your, if you're licensed or you're interning or you're just in the beginning phases of everything. But we want to inform our clients of everything that is included in the paperwork, so they know what's in there and how they can ask, the best question to basically serve them in the best way possible. So in the client's paperwork, so when you're following either the AAMFT or the ACA, the client's paperwork is one of the essential parts of clinical practice. Why? Because this is where everything that they need to know is written down. And we as therapists want to make sure that they are aware of it. So even though I'm seeing the clients virtually, I'm still obviously going over the paperwork with them. I tell them who I am. I tell them what my practice's policies are. And I tell them, we talk about confidentiality and the limitations and a lot of other things. But as we're talking about like suicidal ideations and self-harm, the language might be a little bit different. So first, with your practice's policies, you want to reiterate that with your clients. Excuse me. One of the most important things we have in our paperwork is when a crisis comes up, we have the client's information of which hospital they would like to go to and who is the best person of contact for them. Right. So this is going to be useful, and we will talk about that later on. Two, for the standard for the AMFT, for the technology assistance and professional services, again, as this is a new pathway that is created for clients to have access to have therapists, we want to make sure we are reiterating the consent to treat or even to supervise. So obviously to treat, we want to let them know, hey, this is what we're doing via telehealth, and this is how this is potentially going to go. Along with the consent to treat via telehealth, you also want to inform them about potential risks. For me, because I live in the great state of Texas, and from time to time, like for the last month now, we've had tornado warnings, and my clients will hear the sirens going on in the background. I'll inform them. I'll say, hey, I'm sorry. You might hear sirens going on in the background. That's because we have a tornado warning, but I will let you know if we need to jump off, and then I will call you the next day. So thankfully, none hasn't came around here, so knock on wood. And the other thing is Wi-Fi, right? Because moments it can be windy, so you inform them of what are the other options that takes place when you are, doing telehealth with your clients. And then the other thing is the confidentiality, as it being the professional's responsibility and what that also entails. So you want to let them know what the confidentiality is when you're doing telehealth with your clients. And really, it's not different when you're seeing them in person. The only thing that is actually that you want to talk about is you want to make sure that your clients are in a safe place where they can talk freely and without little to no distractions. And I tell that to my parents when I see their children. I'll say, hey, please make sure your child is in a room where they can be by themselves and free of distractions, and that no one can easily just walk in and hear what we have to say. So you want to set the ground rules immediately, or else you have parents come in periodically to say stuff to you during session. And that can impede in the therapeutic rapport that you have with your clients, or even the process sometimes. So you want to set that tone early on so they are aware of it. Okay, so when we're talking about confidentiality and limitations, obviously when we're having this conversation with them, the same thing you will tell them, hey, the things that we talk about in sessions are confidential. If you tell me, if I'm talking to my adolescents, if you tell me, your dad's cooking is horrible, I'm not going to go tell them that your dad's cooking is horrible. If you tell me that sometimes you want to run away, I'm not going to tell them that unless you're actively planning on doing something like that. So ethically and legally, we are supposed to inform them of confidentiality. Hey, the things that we talk about stays between us unless you tell me you're going to, one, hurt yourself, or you're having active suicidal ideations, or you're actively harming yourself. So there's an intent and a plan. Or if there's two, suicidal ideation, intent, or a plan. And three, abuse of any kind. And I will list that off because sometimes whenever I just say abuse, they automatically just think it's physical. So I have to inform them of that, especially when it comes to an elder or a minor. I tell them I am a mandated reporter, and that then, because I live in the state of Texas, once I report, they just investigate and decide whether or not they're going to open a case and move it forward. But I'll get an email or notification after I report to see if that's what they're going to do. So here in the state of Texas, we do have a duty to warn. So that has changed over the years. So you want to make sure in your state if you have a duty to warn or not, because if you do, then you want to make sure you're following that, that law in your state. So the next thing we're going to be discussing is suicide and self-harm assessments. And so basically what that looks like, and I know that a lot of therapists, they, depending on your clinical background, or even when you are, or what your mode of therapy is, or your mode of practice is, because every therapist is different, you want to be able to understand the levels of suicidality because they're not always the same. So it all basically kind of falls under this, this kind of model here. Sometimes you'll have your clients, so they'll obviously no ideation or plan. And then some of them will have intrusive thoughts where they just have this thought of, oh, this just popped in my mind, but there still is no intent or plan. Next, they might have thoughts of death. And then there are suicidal ideations of, I want to, or I'm having thoughts of doing this to myself, right? But there's no intent. Next, you're looking at suicidal intent, and then you can therefore decide whether or not it's passive or it's active. And then you have suicidal plan and intent, and then there's suicide attempts. The most important thing you want to look at as a therapist when you are assessing is the level and the severity of it, and especially the language, what is being used. So here, when assessing, suicide risks, this can inform you about whether or not you are needing to take further action. But we'll talk about that when we get into the children and adolescents and working with individuals, couples, and families. So here, we have a little temperature scale here, and it's okay, low risk, they're having some thoughts, no plan. Moderate risk, they're suicidal ideation, but with very vague plans, but they don't really know. And then you have high risk, and then you have severe risks. There are some therapists that are out there, even if their client is experiencing moderate risk, they might, inform, especially if it's adolescent, they might inform, quote unquote, break confidentiality and inform the parents. We as therapists will obviously be using our best clinical judgment in order to figure out the best plan of action for our clients in that regard. So now, some of the assessments that you can use, I use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale quite often, and it comes in a lot of different, like 114 different languages. And all of the assessments that you see here, they are high in sensitivity and specificity in terms of classifying and identifying suicidal behaviors, as well as whether or not your client is at high risk, low risk, moderate risk, and then what you should do. Again, as therapists, we want to be able to make sure we are assessing the severity or the risk as thorough as possible. And so the other one that you can use is using the suicide assessment, the SLAP method, which is where you're assessing for if they have a specific plan, if they have anything lethal around them, is it available, and what's the proximity to which they have this, the weapon that they're planning on using, or method actually that they're planning on using. The other one is the self-harm behavior. Again, you want to assess whether or not the self-harm is when because it's classified under, maybe is it passive or is it like this active? They are hurting themselves. It is injurious. Sometimes I'll have clients that they may rub their skin or something like that, and repeatedly, or the same area, or take a pen and just make a mark on their wrist or something, or in their thighs, or wherever it might be. And so even if that's the case, you're still assessing to make sure that it's not one that could potentially lead into possible injurious suicidal attempts for your client. Next, we have non-suicidal self-injurious thoughts and behaviors. So that interview, it's assessing the kind of thoughts and behaviors they might have. And then you have your suicide behavior questionnaire, and then the adult suicidal ideation questionnaire. So a lot of the assessments that are out there, again, when we're working with our clients, we want to make sure that the tools or the instruments that you are using, not only are they evidence-based practices, but that you are still using your clinical judgment in order to decide what your potential next steps will be. So telehealth with children and adolescents, and right now my caseload is like 95% children and adolescents. And in the beginning, that's the first thing I ask. I'll ask them, hey, so tell me, have you had thoughts of hurting or harming yourself in the last couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks? And then I'd listen to the language that or how they talk about it. Excuse me. And so, and it varies. So when I am, looking at them through my computer screen, I'm just looking around the room and obviously paying attention to them to see if I can pick up on any clues that may give me a better context of what my client is experiencing. So with children and adolescents, sometimes the older they get, there's a higher probability of previous suicidal ideations or self-harm attempts. So there's a history there. So when you are aware of a history, it is something for you as a therapist, when you're working via telehealth, to ask periodically where they are at. For one of my clients, I typically ask almost every week because the risk is high. And so I want to make sure that my client is aware that it's on my radar and that we are working and implementing, or even encouraging my client to use their plan that they have for themselves when their triggers or their stress becomes a little bit overbearing for them. So I'm looking for a history of like frequent mood changes, and just, agitation, or if they maybe used it as a threat. And then you can assess that a little bit further. And then just agitation, if there's a mood dysregulation, hopelessness, and you'll know as a therapist what that looks like and what that sounds like with them. So the plan of action for when the child or the adolescent experiencing high to severe risks. Again, every therapist is going to be different. For a client, a therapist who has done the proper assessments for their clients, and they know, and it's at moderate, they still might go follow this step. But this is the step that I have used for myself in my practice. Or when I see my clients. So obviously, first thing, I'm using the proper assessment and I'm making notes of it. We use our clinical judgment in determining the level of risk. Then here we're reminding the child or the adolescent of confidentiality and limitations. So say, hey, to the client, after we just did the assessment, is showing me that, the risks that you are experiencing active thoughts of harming yourself, or even you have a plan or an intent. So I have to tell your parents. And so once you inform the parents of this, you give the parent the option of either calling 911 or taking the child to the nearest hospital. Okay. And so either either way, you're going to eventually get to a safety plan, working a safety plan with the client as well as with the parent. If the parent refuses to take any kind of action, that is when, especially in the state of Texas, and especially for our practice, that is grounds for making a CPS report. And we indicate that. We'll tell the parent, because you're refusing to call 911 or even to take the child to the nearest hospital, we have to report it. And then CPS will take over from there. So, and then after that, obviously you want to collab. Let's assume that they say, yes, we've already called 911. It's on the way. We want to make sure that the parents are in the room with the client. I am not logging off. I'm staying there with the clients and with the parents. And then we're going to collaborate on a safety plan. By now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are now aware that we no longer use contracts because there is a negative connotation to it. So we want to remove contracts. We just want to get to a safety plan to reiterate protective factors for the child and the adolescent. And then this is also an opportunity where you are basically helping the parents get into a mode of, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. This is where we need to go from here. Again, you want to use your clinical judgment depending on what your client is presenting with, and then you go from there. And then finally, check-ins. After that, you're periodically checking in with your clients and you're checking in with the parents. I inform the parents, hey, I inform the parents, I want you to call me or email me if you're noticing anything that's resembling self-harm, or they're talking about, going back to those vulnerability indicators of vulnerability to suicidal behaviors. And because we want to educate them on it. Because sometimes parents just think, oh, my child is depressed, they're suicidal. That's not always the case. So that's where that's important to do. And then the next thing is to document everything. I cannot stress that enough. Document everything. In my practice, we have an online software that we use, and there is a tab for therapists' notes. That's only for me, as well as my contact log. I'm documenting in both all the time, which assessments that were used, what the parents talked about. Obviously, when I'm not using any identifying information for the contact log, but for my notes, no one can access it. So then I'm noting everything that's taken place. So next, when we're working with individuals, couples, and families, obviously these are the clients that are above the age of 18, and they're also experiencing suicidal ideations or self-harming. So again, some of the indicators and warning signs of suicide, where again, there's past attempts. Whenever there's a history, that is where the radar goes up. That's something to take note of, to check in from time to time with your clients. Co-occurring diagnoses. We have ADHD, mood disorders, personality disorders, feelings of helplessness, worthlessness, hopelessness. When you are familiar with the DSM diagnosis and what the prevalence or the probabilities are for increased suicidal behaviors, you will take action in order to make sure you're assessing those behaviors, or for those clients a little bit more. So for the plan of action for the individual, the adults up and up, ages 18 and up, who are high risk and even severe risk. The first thing, when they are telling me that they're actively thinking about wanting to hurt themselves, or they have a plan and there's an intent, the first thing is I am sending them a release of information just to cover our end, ethically and legally. So the release of information is going to come in handy, because when we get to the part where you're communicating with the hospital, where they're giving you permission to communicate with the hospital just to check on them, right? Say, hey, my client was admitted there. We want to make sure they're okay. And this is also needed for continue services with your client. So you have that release of information there. for the individual, for the couple, or for the family. I haven't done family therapy yet in, using telehealth yet, but when I do, I'm sure that that's going to be, a very interesting experience. Then if they are telling me that they, again, are still active, I'm going to inform them to get a trusted person involved. I'll probably ask them to grab their phone, to call someone they trust to come into their house. Again, this release of information is going to be important. I'll fill it out myself, even if I need to, just to make sure that everything is covered, who the person is and who the contact person is, and the emergency hospital that they are going to go to. If they don't have someone, you call 911 as the therapist. Okay. So once you call 911, you're letting them know, obviously, hey, I am breaking confidentiality, reminding them, because you are actively thinking about harming yourself. You call 911, and then you stay on until the paramedics arrive. And then obviously after that, you have a way of communicating with them once they arrive at the hospital of their choice. And so if they do have a trusted person, you obviously get that person to call 911, and you have them take them to the hospital, and you communicate either with the hospital or with a trusted individual to make sure everything is okay towards, throughout that process. And then obviously when you're working with just as with the children and adolescents, you want to document everything here. ROI was signed at this date, this time, client gave permission, release of information to communicate with X person, client was sent to this hospital, date and time, everything. So you have it on your end. So next is there's extra resources, and the websites are obviously there. So so you have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and the number is there, and this is widely used. I have used this number for clients who wanted to end session, or they're coming to an end of therapy, but they may not have had anyone they felt comfortable talking to. So they have this option here, and it does. Again, they can attend to different languages, as well as hearing impaired or even visually impaired. They have accessibility for just about anyone. And then the other is the National Institute of Mental Health. There are a lot of resources and screening tools and kits that you can use as a therapist for your client through that website. And then the Zero Suicide as well, which I've used plenty of time, and they have some very valuable information and even training that you can use for when you are working with your clients. Again, remember, a lot of the tools and the assessments that you use, yes, you can obviously use it. It works just the same way as in person as you would via telehealth. Sometimes the language is just a little bit different when you're having that conversation with them. And so then these are the references that you guys can look up for yourself. So are there any questions, concerns, thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Yemi.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and open up the Q&A session. We do have 2 questions in the Q&A currently, but for those of you who have questions and would like to contribute to the conversation, you can add those to the Q&A while we're moving through. If you can think of any questions, we have a great expert here where you can ask questions to as well. So the first question I have here, where does self-harm, and I think you may have mentioned this, but we'll see. Where does self-harm that is not suicidal fall on the thermostat?
So self-harm that is not suicidal, again, for me, that would be considered under low risk. If it's low risk, which, thank you, that's a good question. I thought about it. So low risk, moderate, or high, I'm still doing some kind of plan to encourage them to access some kind of some kind of safety plan, right? Like, okay, let's talk about some of these protective factors. Let's talk about things that have that have worked for you in the past. Let's talk about who you do trust, you can talk to. Who are those top 3 people? What about other coping skills that you might have tried in the past that that has worked? And we want to focus on a little bit more of that. But if they are saying, yes, I am cutting, but I'm not suicidal, I will definitely inform. I'll say, hey, because you're, harming yourself. I want to make sure ethically, okay, let's see if we can get a handle on this, but I will let them know there will be a point where if it's something that we are having difficulties with getting a handle on, then I am informing your parents about it so we can have another plan. It's not to punish you of any kind, especially when we're talking about adolescents and children. Yes.
Thank you. All right. The next question is, how long does one have to keep the watch on a person who has mentioned or stated harming oneself?
Again, for how long? That's a very good question. The length is depending on their ability to quickly utilize the safety plan that you have constructed and work collaboratively with them. I've had clients where I do have to check every week, and I have clients that I'll probably check every other week, and I have clients that I might check once a month. So you as a clinician have to use your clinical judgments and gauging how frequent you are going to do that. We don't want to make it overbearing, right? For a client, like, hey, so have you? But you can say, hey, I was thinking about you. Tell me how those coping skills have been working for you that we talked about last week. What's working? What's not working? If it's not working, do you want to, tweak it a little bit or just throw it away? So you're giving them the autonomy to decide, because that's what we want. We want them to feel confident to access those tools when they are experiencing those suicidal ideations or even self-harm.
Awesome. You all are asking some great questions here.
Yes.
And the Q&A is still open. So if you'd like to ask questions, you can go ahead and add that to the Q&A. Our next questions, that they're asking about the references. Would you be able to put those back up?
I can.
If at all possible. Just a reminder, I am getting a couple questions about this. I put it in the chat where you'll be able to find the video for this. I'll be editing it and posting it within 24 hours of this presentation. You can find it on our CTL LibGuides page, and then you can also find it on our CTL YouTube page. For those of you who are attending now, you will get that email with the links as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, I also forgot to mention, another very important tool to have is a list of agencies and communities that within your state or city that you have access to, that you can also send to parents or to loved ones. Say, hey, okay, here's a list of places and agencies that you can reach out to in the meantime or in the process. Or even if they know that their child has a very active past history of self-harm or suicidal attempts, I'll encourage the parents to start creating a plan even beforehand, because it's better to have it now rather than trying to scramble to come up with something as it's happening. So I have another a PDF file of just list of all the places in the Houston area, because all of my clients are in the Houston, Cypress area. But that has also been very useful.
Awesome. This is a question. I know you said you work with adolescents primarily.
As of right now, yeah.
So right, okay, well, we'll answer this. What would you do if you are counseling a spouse or a partner and they say that their partner has suicidal thoughts at times?
So when the partner is having, so basically what will happen is when I see a couple, the first session I see them together, obviously, because I want to get just a better understanding of what's going on. The next 2 sessions is where I'm seeing them individually, where I am assessing for that. I'll say, hey, have you had any, and you assess and you gauge where it is at. So in the paperwork that we have, it still states, hey, if there is a crisis or if there is something going on, who is the best person to reach and where is it that you would like to go? So if the partner states, hey, my partner is having active suicidal ideations, I'm going to assess it. I'll say, hey, this is what's brought to my attention because safety is a big thing for me. So I'll say this safety is a big thing for me. So I want to make sure you're safe. So tell me where you're at. If we assess and then the results come up to they are at high risk, then I'm following my plan. I'll say, hey, I need you to call your partner in the room, ROI. I'm getting ROI down. They need to call 911 and just to make sure they are good and then get them to a hospital and have the partner call me, or I'm in communication with the partner if that is happening. Yes, I haven't had that happen. It's for me to go to that step. Most of the clients, the couples that I've seen, it's been low risk, like no risk at all to like mild risk. It hasn't even been moderate, but they'll say, yeah, from time to time, I have thoughts about it, but I have no plan or intent. So again, you're looking for the language. It's, I don't have a plan or anything. So then that's where the level of risk decreases.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. What if the parents are those who refuse to believe that their loved one is actually suicidal? Like if their parents are in denial?
If the parents are in denial, I am calling 911. Because at this point, my concern is for my clients, not to assess whether or not you're believing it or not, because we as therapists, we are equipped. Hopefully most of us are equipped to see the signs, to read the signs, to interpret it in the best way possible, to take in all the contextual factors into consideration, and then knowing what the best plan of actions to take. And so if the parents are telling me no, or I don't think so, or they're in denial, I'll say, well, according to what we've talked about, this is what's happening and this is what I'm going to do. If you are choosing to not, I will have to report, and you want to document all of that, everything. I will go into my contact log, or not contact log, but my notes. Assessment was done on child. The result came up as high risk. Parents denied calling 911 or taking child to closest hospital. Therapist contacted or reported. Yeah. And then they go from there.
Okay. All right.
That was a good one.
Yeah. The questions are coming in, just FYI, which is great. Let's see. What do you recommend to protect the therapeutic relationship with a child or adolescent after you break confidentiality regarding suicidality? I don't know why I can't.
That I love that. Whoever asked that question, that is like an ongoing nightmare that I have, that I have broken therapeutic rapport with a child. And it has happened before where a child no longer wanted to see me because I had to break confidentiality. And as I said, safety is a priority for me. You see the clients for 45 minutes, an hour, and they are outside in the world for the majority of the time. So with the time that I see you, I'm taking everything into consideration. I'm making sure, I want to make sure that, again, if we're honoring the public, I want to make sure that you are okay. And so sometimes that just happens. This is a risk. This is a potential risk when you are breaking confidentiality. And I always inform the child or the adolescent very early on, the moment I meet them. When I do have a child client, I always meet the parents first without the child, because we don't want to talk about the child in front of the child like they're not there. And so I now just get all the information, and I tell the parent, this is confidentiality, and then here are the limitations to confidentiality. Then the next time when I meet the child, I tell the child, this is confidentiality, and these are the limitations to confidentiality, obviously in a developmentally appropriate way. And then when they disclose it, and we are at high risk or severe risk, I let them know, because you told me XYZ, because this is what the results are coming in and they're looking at, as I have to inform your parents, and we have to create a plan. And if they hate me for it, I would rather them hate me for it than for them to not be here. So, yeah. It's a risk, but it's a risk that we have to take. So,
and Elizabeth, thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Let's see. The next question is from Julius. Good afternoon, Dr. Yemi. In a situation where the client wants to quit counseling, but you feel concerned for that client, how do you handle a situation like that?
Are we talking about an adult or child? If we're talking about a child, obviously the parents are the one giving consent, right, for the child. I'll have, again, we have communication with the parent about it. Before, if that is the case, if it's for a child or an adult, I will always leave them with every resource I have, and I will document that client stated they no longer wanted services, especially if they're an adult, because you can't call on their behalf, right? And if they deny this, I don't want you to call, I'll figure it out. You say, okay, well, this is a concern, this is an issue for me, and I don't want to leave you just hanging, right? So you might feel inclined to call 911 and to have 911, do what it is that they need to do. Then you let them know that you're breaking confidentiality because they are at high risk, and give them all the resources possible that you have constructed for yourself. I have a folder of just suicidal resources, and I'll go in there and I'm emailing, and I'll even ask if there's someone that you trust that I can also email this to, or that I can connect them with. And if they say yes, then I'm doing that as well. The only thing is, we don't want to leave them empty-handed if that is the case. Same thing with the child or the parents. I'm sending the resources to the parents, what agencies that they can contact if they don't want to see a therapist anymore, where they can go. But that's also a good one. So you basically want to use your best clinical judgment, with that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's what I would do. I would give them all the resources.
Okay. This seems to be like an extension to the parent denial, maybe more like parent angry question.
Okay.
It's more of a scenario. Let's see. When a client is actively planning to follow through with hurting themselves, if we as therapists have to call 911 and we let family know we will be breaking confidentiality, etc., and the family becomes angry, hangs up on you, or in their virtual session after calling 911, what could you recommend you do next if the client / family are not answering their phone, but you need to stay on the call until paramedics arrive?
Again, I just want to remind you, it is not breaking confidentiality if they are actively going to hurt themselves. Yeah, if they're that's where confidentiality is broken. That's the limitation. Confidentiality is broken if you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, if you tell me you're going to hurt someone else. Here in Texas, we have a duty to warn. And if there's been any abuse of any kind to a child or a minor. So you're not breaking confidentiality. And if they do become angry, so if it's for a child and they do become angry and they don't want to talk to you, I'm calling CPS. And I'm documenting. Again, you want to make sure you are doing what you can ethically, safety is a concern. And if they're not answering your calls, I mean, you can't force them to answer, but you can do what you can on your end. And that's what that plan of action is, along with you documenting it to make sure that if they were to go back and say, oh, hey, Dr. Yemi did not, but you have evidence that you did in the past. Timestamp, date stamp, everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely very important to document.
It is important to document. I document for, like, I'll have, if any of you are familiar with working with borderline personality clients, I document every email, every phone call, because when it has come back before saying Dr. Yemi did not, and I show everything, and I go, well, according to this, it's documented 8 months ago that this is what happened.
Right.
And so it's really honestly to protect you, and that you are really, really taking your plan of action, like you're really working on it, and you're making the best decision for your clients, and also making sure that, it falls under, legal and ethical, the codes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Someone is asking, can you talk a bit about the types of things that are included in the safety plan?
Okay, so very good question. I wish I posted one of my, or put an example of one that I have used. So there are a lot of safety plans out there, a lot. So basically the safety plans follow the same kind of model or list, where it identifies that they are able to understand and have insight of their triggers, or where their emotional state is at when it happens, right? So an increase of emotional awareness or even emotional intelligence is vital for this, because if they're just kind of nonchalantly going about their day and they're passing or doing the same thing, that increases the probability of having suicidal ideations. They're not making that connection. Then we like, hey, I know this, every time we have this conversation, you're doing X, Y, Z, and it's increasing this. So maybe we should figure out another plan. Having a level of awareness would say, hey, when this happens, this is where my mind goes. 2, I have them list 3 to 5 people that they trust wholeheartedly that they trust. And I also encourage them to put my name down on there if we've built, the therapeutic alliance that is strong enough that they want to put my name on there. I've had plenty of clients put their name on there, and they'll call me or they'll email me, hey, I'm having thoughts, what can I do? And I praise them for contacting me, because we want to decrease isolation, like connect with someone. Increasing protective factors, AKA social skills, reading a book, drawing, listening to music, exercising, going for a walk, baking, cooking, whatever that might be. Safety plan. And then any agencies that are around that they can contact. Again, my number will probably be on there, or a crisis hotline will go on there. If I've tried all of these things, it's not working, now I need to get to here. So it's like a level. Level 1, I'm aware, I'm doing breathing exercises. Level 2, okay, I may need to talk to someone. Let me call my BFF, or let me call my mom or my dad or my grandma or my uncle, whoever. Level 3, okay, I need to be a little bit more proactive. I may need to remove myself from the environment, from the situation, give myself some space. Okay, that's not working. Level 4, I need to contact some agency or services, because this is it. So we'll go through that. Yeah, that was a good one.
Okay. We have another question from Charmaine. How much freedom do you give the client when making a plan as to making choices as to what to include in the plan? I'm assuming this is a safety plan.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're going to assume this is a safety plan. Yes. How much freedom do I give them? I give them their liberty, because they have to be the ones to use it. It's their plan, so it needs to be tailored to them. I'm assuming you're thinking if I'm assuming, I don't know if you're thinking, oh, maybe they listed a coping skill that you as a therapist don't think it's really productive. Then again, if you have built if you've built a relationship with them, you can say, I've noticed that you listed this coping skill, but in the past you said it didn't really help. Do you want to keep it on there, or do you want to pick something else? So you're giving them that option. If they say, I want to keep it on there because I want to work on it, okay, we'll keep it on there. Let me know if it works. Let me know if there's anything different or what have you. But they create that plan. It's just collaborative. I may say, oh, hey, how about this? Have you tried this? And then you put that, you can include that on the list with them. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question from Shirley. What if a person that may have had thoughts in their younger years, but it appears that they have matured or mindset has changed, and then later, I'm assuming they attempt suicide and you did
Mm-hmm.
not see it coming. So maybe they had previous suicide ideation when they were younger, didn't really have any indications,
Mm-hmm.
but then they surprised you and attempted.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so what was the question? What was the question?
What if a person that may have had thoughts in their younger years, I'm assuming those are suicidal thoughts,
Okay.
but it appears that they have matured and their mindset has changed, but later they actually end up committing suicide. Not committing suicide, attempting suicide. My apologies.
Attempting suicide. So later, thank you for, yes, the language again, attempting suicide. And that happens, that has happened before. And if that is the case, I guess I'm still not understanding the question. Is it what do I do as the therapist, or where do you think? I guess I need a little bit more clarity on what's being asked so I can,
Okay. Shirley, if you can clarify either in the Q&A or the chat how you would like Dr. Yemi to answer that would be great. Let me see, make sure.
Well, because I guess the one thing is to note is,
okay,
as therapists, we don't always know. We don't, like I said, we meet them for 45 minutes or an hour, so we don't always know. But the thing is, we want to make sure that we go back, because we want to, or at least for me, I want my clients to be aware that I have their safety in mind, and that I am going to go back and talk about it, with them. If there was an attempt, then we'll talk about it. And if we have not made a safety plan, we're going to make a safety plan, because they could have attempted to hurt themselves. And then that week they're good, like, I'm fine. So we'll talk about what was the activating event, what was going on, like what skills or what coping skills did you use? And then we'll go from there. So we're going to have this conversation about it. I've actually had a client for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks during my practicum for my master's, like, oh no, I have none, even though they had a history. And I'll check periodically. They say, no, it'll be low risk, low risk, low risk. And then one day they never showed up because they attempted. And I didn't know until my professor told me that they got a call from the hospital, because my client wanted me to know that they were in the hospital. And so sometimes you don't know, and the client never returned back. So, and there was nothing I can do about it at that point. Right. Because they were in hospital. So,
right. That's interesting because I mean, you don't have any control on what the client actually divulges to you.
The thing is, if there's an indication of any kind, if they're again, low, moderate, high risk, you want them to be aware that it is on your radar. And I talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'll say, hey, so last time you told me you thought about this, would you classify that as an active thought, or is that like one of those invasive thoughts where it just kind of pops into your mind? And then they'll tell me, we'll talk about it. Say, no, it was just kind of weird. I was just walking around and just popped in my mind. I was like, that was weird. And I went about my day. And I was like, oh, so you didn't have any more thoughts about, about anything like that throughout the day? They're like, no, it was just weird. So I'll assess for that, because again, it happens. You want to make sure that, you want to make sure that they're okay. And so if they do, and then that builds kind of like this normalcy in having the conversation that, oh, I don't want to tell my therapist that I thought about this because then they're going to think I'm going to hurt myself. It's like, no, there are thoughts that don't indicate that. But let's talk about, like, do you have it often? What's going on? Because it could be an underlying something else that we need to discuss. So you just want to assess that in the best way possible.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time, we're going to close the Q&A at this time. However, Dr. Yemi, did you have anything that you want to add or contacts that you wanted to give our folks before we move to closing?
That was the other thing, contacts. If you want to contact me to ask for further questions, can I put it in the chat?
Put it in the chat, or if you want me to type it, whatever.
I'll put it in the chat. I know that might be easier. What is my email address? Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, you guys ask a lot of great questions, and it's all situational based. Nope, that's not it. Every client is going to be very different. So again, safety is first at the top of my list. I just want to make sure that my client is covered and I'm covering myself, my licensure, my practice as well. And then I'm documenting everything, because
document.
Document. It has saved me so many times. Like, oh, you didn't answer my email. And I say, well, here it says at 9:30 a.m. that I responded to your even if it's something very, very, very minute, I responded to your email. It's there. And then, yes, talk to your supervisors if you have associate licensure. Talk about it. Yes.
And by the way, in the chat right now, everyone is saying they have gathered a lot of information from your presentation. Even from the very beginning, people were like, I want to say, but this seems to have been a very helpful presentation. So thank you for the information that you've provided to everyone today. That was very insightful for everyone.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. So just a friendly reminder, we also want to thank Dr. Yemi for taking the time to present to us and share her expertise. We want to also thank the attendees for actively participating and being a part of the webinar today. As a reminder, the recording will be posted on the CTL LibGuides and the YouTube page within 24 hours. All right, folks, it has been a pleasure. Have a good evening. Again, thank you, Dr. Yemi.
You're welcome.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Bye.